Hello and welcome to the Week 11 Football Outsiders Coach Ranking Show. I'm Ian O'Connor, Senior Data Analyst here at Football Outsiders. Joining me again this week is Vince Verhei, Football Outsiders Assistant Editor. This week we're going to be talking about Jett Saturday's big win. We had a lot to say about him last week. A lot of people did. We'll be looking at Josh McDaniels on the other side, or the Raiders hitting rock bottom. The Packers and Bucks offenses came alive last week, and Kyle Shanahan's got some perplexing usage that has been kind of a hot topic this week. And we're also going to look ahead to some of our favorite matchups from Week 11 like we do every week. Before we get started, I just want to ask you a question out there if you're watching. Are your season-long fantasy teams floundering at this point in the season? Just a few weeks to go until the playoffs. If you're out of it, come play on Underdog Fantasy with us and double your first deposit up to $100 using promo code OUTSIDERS. Play Underdog's Battle Royale, which is a fast 6-round weekly fantasy football draft. Gives you a little bit simpler chances to win than traditional daily fantasy sports sites. And you can even win $50,000 if you grab the first place prize. Or try their pick'em games where you can easily pick players' chances to go higher or lower than their projected stat lines, basically building out a parlay of prop bets. And that is available even in states where traditional prop betting currently is not. Underdog is the fastest growing fantasy site around, so join the fun over at UnderdogFantasy.com or download Underdog in the App Store and use promo code OUTSIDERS now to double your first deposit up to $100. That's a free $100 waiting for you at Underdog Fantasy. So with that in the books, we'll jump right into our lead story, which is kind of the same as it was last week in a way, with Jett Saturday leading the Colts to victory, if you could call it that. Last week, we talked about the surprise hiring of Jett Saturday. Well, his first order of business was to pull a switcheroo on everyone and say he was starting Sam Ehlinger, and then on game day have Matt Ryan go out and start. It worked. The Colts went to Vegas and got a win, a big game from Jonathan Taylor. It's only been one game against what really is a disaster of a Raiders team. But Vince, was this a case you think of just a team being kind of invigorated under a new coach, which you see often, or do you think Saturday did some things or showed you some things where you think he could actually be a good fit at this position?
Well, let's say right off the bat, congratulations to Jett Saturday. Congratulations to the Indianapolis Colts. You earned that win. You played better than the other team. You deserve that victory. And clearly, I underestimated him because I on this show last week suggested all kinds of things that could go wrong. And in fact, of the two teams playing that game in Las Vegas, they were the more professional football team. They showed up where they were supposed to be and did their jobs as best as they could. Way, way better than the Raiders did. As far as what's going on, what's going to happen in the future going forward, I would never say I was convinced of anyone being great or terrible coach, player, GM, announcer, what have you, after only one game. So we'll see what happens the rest of this year. The only thing I can tell you for sure right now is that A, the washed up, dead arm zombie version of Matt Ryan is still worlds better than whatever Sam Ehlinger has to offer. And B, the Colts were actually trying to win that game. I'm not convinced the Raiders were by their own admission.
Yeah, Derek Carr had a lot to say after the game in his post-game press conference, getting very emotional, perhaps about some of the preparation and attitude from some of the people in the building in that Raiders organization. Was not pretty. You said Matt Ryan kind of coming in. It seemed like that was a pretty popular, common sentiment was that it was dumb to even have Sam Ehlinger out there in the first place for a couple games. He just didn't look good. Matt Ryan, for what he is these days, is still better than Sam Ehlinger, and they're going to stick with it going forward, which is a smart play. So another smart move by Jett Saturday already.
Yeah, and Ryan, and let's be clear, this is not a resurgent game for him. It's not like he's going to be tearing up teams week after week now. He only threw 2 deep balls against Las Vegas the entire game. Both were incomplete. Most of his throws were within 5 or 6 yards of the line of scrimmage, and the Raiders just didn't bother tackling anybody. Let him go for big gains. And then, of course, the most famous play of this game was the 39-yard run by the 37-year-old quarterback down the sideline, where we all watched it happen and kind of said, what just happened? How is this possible? This was the longest run of Ryan's career by nearly double. He had a 20-yard run back. He was age 25. It would have been like 2010 or so. But yeah, he'd never come close to having a run this long before. And here he is out now with the old man with a walker, and that's enough to beat the Raiders because Mike Tanier's broken this down and has walked through the columns. But when you actually watch the Raiders defense in that play, they're not paying attention. They're half asleep. They got no idea what's going on. And then when they do realize what's happening, They're literally jogging after the quarterback at one point, and there's a guy by the sideline who could make a tackle, but he gives it 40% effort, and Matt Ryan jukes him out of his shoes down the sideline for more yards. It was a sorry performance for these Raiders.
If Matt Ryan's juking you at this point, you should probably just hang it up.
You
Maybe
you
for
you may time to consider a new career, yeah.
yeah, take a couple games off, get a little bit better. But on the other side, you mentioned that Raiders team is just pretty much a train wreck right now. Their only two wins are against the Broncos and the Texans. Las Vegas is one of only two teams, two defenses to allow more than 16 points to the Broncos, and it was their highest scoring output of the year. Is Josh McDaniels, maybe in your eyes, is he in danger of being fired even before the end of the season? Or will this be another one of those scapegoat fires we see someone within that organization, like we talked about just a couple weeks ago?
We were talking about the on the FO Data Show with Aaron Schatz and Brian Knowles, the rematch this week between the Broncos and Raiders. Nathaniel Hackett versus Josh McDaniels, round two. In a perfect world, they would steal from pro wrestling and do a loser leaves town match here with the losing coach being fired. And then in a perfect world, the game would end in a tie and they'd both be gone. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think that's the any of it actually is going to happen. For the Raiders specifically, NFL reporter Dov Kleiman, citing Bill Plaschke of the LA Times, explains that the Raiders are too cash poor. They don't have the money on hand to fire McDaniels, pay him the money they owe him, and hire another coach, which means not only is he going to get through this year, Josh McDaniels is apparently going to be the Las Vegas Raiders coach through 2023. He's got another year and a half on the job here. Now that sucks because, as we talked about, this team is checked out. These players are not giving 100%. The quarterback goes in front of reporters after the game, almost literally in tears because some of his teammates are not trying, and he made it very clear a lot of them are doing everything they can on and off the field to get ready to play, but others are not, and he's sick of it, and it's draining him, and that it's a disaster of a situation. But McDaniels is here, and he's going to be here for the intermediate term at least, another year and a half. Now, I will say this in defense of him: this roster is awful. The Mike Mayock, John Gruden regime left this team in shambles. There's about a half dozen, maybe, positive players on either side of the ball here. So they're going to have to, they've got a lot of work to do to rebuild this into a competitive side. Mike Tanier covered this in walkthrough. I believe it ran on Thursday. You can check the walkthrough page at footballoutsiders.com. But he went into detail about what the Raiders need to do to fix this and how it's going to be a long-term fix. Derek Carr probably won't be part of it. He'll probably be the I would assume the number one veteran quarterback available next year, maybe going to a team like the Jets or something. But there's going to be big changes at the Raiders, and it's going to take a long time to get them back to being competitive.
Yeah, and Mike, that's something he and I talked about on Monday. I had brought up the Raiders chapter of the ALMANAC. I'm like, I don't remember who wrote that. It was Mike saying how a lot of people saw them get to the playoffs last year. They got kind of lucky in that Tuesday afternoon COVID game against the Browns. A couple other ones at the end of the season. This team wasn't really a playoff team in the eyes of some people, including us, based on their roster. They weren't really a very solid roster. They went out and made some acquisitions when they weren't necessarily the team, a solid roster that could make it back to the playoffs again without getting kind of lucky. And it's showing, again, to your point, that it's not all McDaniels' fault.
Right. And one of those moves, and this is on the current regime. This is not Mayock and Gruden, but signing Chandler Jones and trading away Yannick Ngakoue was a disaster. Ngakoue had more sacks against the Raiders on Sunday than Chandler Jones has for the Raiders all season. That's no good.
That's not what you want at all.
No.
Yeah, and another one of those guys, they brought in Devontae Adams, who wasn't very happy. Either doesn't seem like it is having as good a time as he had in Green Bay the last couple of years. Maybe wishing he would have stayed. Again, it's one season, but like I said, he went to play with Derek Carr, and you just said that Derek Carr's probably not going to be there anymore. And I think we all kind of agree. So he's kind of going to be in a situation where maybe he wished he had stayed in Green Bay if he's not already wishing that. And speaking of Green Bay, that's our next topic today. Yes.
It is. I will say this for Devontae Adams. I watched most of that game because I'm a sicko. He is one of the guys in the Raiders who actually is still doing everything he can to help them win. It is funny, though, like if you talk to the Raiders and the Packers, that's a trade that seems to have worked out poorly for both teams. Packers would probably really love to have Devontae Adams back right about now. and he's not doing anything for the Raiders. They may as well get those picks back and start over there. So that's the opposite when you look at the Tyreek Hill trade, which has worked out for everyone. Tyreek got paid. The Dolphins are better. The Chiefs are doing just fine, and we're able to get some new young talent in there. That's been a win-win-win for everyone involved. The only winner in this Raiders trade is Devontae Adams because at least he got paid.
And he got paid very well.
He did.
And his team, you just mentioned there, Green Bay not having a good go of it, but this week they did. You want to start off with 195-0. I'm sure you've heard that number. People out there watch, you may or may not have heard that this week. That was the Cowboys' all-time record in the history of their franchise when leading by 14 plus in the fourth quarter until this past Sunday when the Packers offense finally came alive. We've all been waiting for it. Led by 3 touchdowns from rookie Christian Watson. More impressive, though, was the way I think the Packers slowed down the defensive player of the year favorite, Micah Parsons, in the Cowboys defense. He had no quarterback hits. He still had some tackles in there, but only 1 tackle for loss. Really kept him from making a huge impact on that game. And the rest of that Cowboys defense, at least down at the late of the game, Green Bay had their best passing performance of the year as well, their best overall offensive performance. What did you see anything from Green Bay specifically deep down that they fundamentally changed things? I know one thing that I saw was that the offensive line, it was their preferred offensive line playing all snaps for the first time, which was great and seemed to be really good for them.
Yeah, there's a lot going on here. First of all, let's not gloss over that 195-0 at the end of the third quarter, went up by 2 touchdowns or more. 2 touchdowns at the end of the third quarter. I mean, that's nice. I would take that every single week, but it shouldn't be infallible. It shouldn't, to go 0 losses in that situation in over half a century of football. That's pretty amazing.
A lot of games.
A lot of games, and Tom Landry's teams were always pretty good, and Jimmy Johnson's teams were always pretty good, and they've been, Parcells. The Cowboys have been a good team for the vast majority of that half century, but still 195-0 is pretty amazing. Now, as far as what happened on Sunday, how they slowed down Micah Parsons in the pass rush. Number one, the most obvious thing: you can't sack the quarterback if he's handing off. And the Packers were running all over Dallas all day. 39 runs, only 22 pass plays, so almost 2-1, which is a very, especially in 2022, that's a very, very, very high run ratio. You don't see that hardly ever outside of Chicago and maybe Atlanta, the other 2 teams that are so pass averse these days. But you mentioned the offensive line. David Bakhtiari played 100% of the snaps for Green Bay on Sunday. That's only the 4th time this year he has played 90% or more. They're 2-2 in those games, 2-4 when he has not played at least 90% of the snaps. So having him on the field is obviously a huge help. And you mentioned Parsons did get a lot of tackles here. He had 5 solo tackles, 7 combined tackles. Those both tied as season highs. But no sacks, no quarterback hits, only one tackle for loss. So with Parsons, you always got to wonder, and it's hard to do unless you're sitting there watching the game in detail and write it down play after play. How often was he playing edge rusher? How often was he playing off-ball linebacker? Last year, it was close to 50-50, but more towards linebacker. This year, most of the year, he's been used as an edge rusher. I didn't see much of this game, honestly. I was traveling a lot on Sunday, so I certainly wasn't charting it. I can tell you, based on the numbers, he had 1 target in coverage, so he wasn't dropping off a ton, or at least the Packers weren't throwing at him a ton. Pro Football Reference lists him with 6 blitzes on the day. And again, I don't know if that counts every time he rushed the passer or just times he landed up at linebacker and then blitzed. But of his 7 tackles, 5 of them came on run plays, 2 of them after completed passes. So just kind of a quiet day, but I think the biggest factor, I guess, in quieting him down is just don't give him a chance to sack the quarterback, hand off instead. And their running game was going so well that it neutralized Dallas's pass rush.
Yeah, and that's one I didn't get to see as much of this as well. Unfortunately, as Packers fans, kind of the tough thing sometimes we're trying to follow so many different games and pay attention to everything. Didn't get to see a lot of it, but I did see the end, and it was a beautiful ending of a football game for me. I love to see it, but hopefully that it can move forward. Again, I think the biggest thing for me was seeing that offensive line together, and hopefully they can get some carry that momentum forward, if you will, into this week. Got a quick turnaround on Thursday night. But another team that got things going this weekend, and it was the first game of the weekend after Thursday, over in Germany, was Tampa Bay. Had their best passing game of the season. Julio Jones scored. Chris Godwin scored his first touchdown of the year. It was also their best rushing game since week 1. Maybe not a coincidence there. Is it a matter of health for them. They really had their big three wide receivers all in the field for maybe the second full game this year. I forget how many games they've all been out there. But was it just a matter of health, or do you think Byron Leftwich did something differently, or is it something just about playing outside the U.S. for Tom Brady? He's very good when he's outside the U.S. as well as inside in the States as well.
He has now won games in 4 different countries: U.S., UK, Germany. I believe Mexico was the other one. It was not Canada, because you would assume at some point he would have beaten the Bills there or something. But anyway, yeah, Tampa Bay beat up on Seattle. I mentioned I didn't see a lot of games this weekend, and this game in particular kicked off 6:30 a.m. Seattle time. I've seen zero of it outside of the highlights, and it doesn't seem like I have a real need to go back and watch much more of it, honestly. The biggest story, actually, is how Tampa Bay was able to run all over Seattle. Because Tampa Bay has been a terrible running team all year. And they got 100 and some yards, and were running clock late in the second half as Seattle was trying to rally. And Seattle cut the score to 1 lead, but couldn't get the ball back because Tampa Bay just kept running for first downs. And that's the biggest story coming out of it. Derek Klassen goes over this game in Film Room this week at Football Outsiders. You can search the Film Room page there to see his breakdown of what they do. But as you noted, Julio Jones, Chris Godwin, and Mike Evans, this is the first time all year they've played in back-to-back games together. So having them on the field together for a stretch there, where they can actually build chemistry and build timing, which they have been able to do going back to the preseason, that was probably a big help. And the other thing is the Seattle defense. It's kind of hard to get a read on them because they were horrible to start the year. The first, what would it be, 5 or 6 weeks, they were among the worst defenses in the entire league. Then they played a lot better for the next month. I mean, a lot better. Like snap for snap, they were as good as anyone else for about a month there. But that was also against a lot of broken offenses. Justin Herbert and the Chargers don't have a lot of things going well. Daniel Jones and the Giants, if you stop Jones scrambles, they don't have much else to offer. And then they beat Kyler Murray and the Cardinals twice. And, Kyler Murray and the Cardinals will beat themselves half the time anyway. So this is their first game against anything close to a real good quarterback and a real good offense in a month. And it looks like the real good quarterbacks and the real good offenses are still going to have the edge over them. So kind of the answer to your question is kind of all of the above. The return to health, the improvement on the ground. Rachaad White appears to be a big upgrade over Leonard Fournette. Maybe he'll be the top guy going forward. Seattle defense maybe is not as good as they looked for most of October. So kind of all this stuff spells up to a Buccaneers win. And, the NFC behind, well, I was going to say behind Philadelphia, but they lost this week too. It's pretty wide open right now. And in another year, we may have been able to write these Bucs off for dead. But with the state of the NFC in general and the NFC South in particular, they are very much alive in this whole thing. And that's not good news for anyone except Tampa Bay.
Yeah, and they're still leading their division. They were, I think, tied for first, but had the tiebreaker. Now they're a full game up on the Atlanta Falcons, who lost last week as well. So things are going well. In that film remarkable, I think, too, that Derek said this was the first or only the second time that they've eclipsed or reached 75 rushing yards, and they did it by a lot this week, Tampa Bay did. So really good. And then the other thing that people out there watching may not know, and I'm sure you're aware of this, Tom Brady actually has not been bad this year. He's actually been very good. He's third in DYAR. He's eighth in DVOA among quarterbacks. It's just they've just had a lot of struggles elsewhere. Like I said, guys haven't been healthy. They lost a ton on the offensive line. So really not surprised to see as they get the receivers. They're in the bye week this week, so they've got even more time with those guys healthy to get practice, get things together, kind of like they did in 2020.
We've got a lot of questions throughout the year about how Brady is the top 5 most weeks in quick reads, and he's been around the top 5 in our overall quarterback rankings. And people watch the Buccaneers and say, "How can that be?" Because they struggle a lot. They're not a smooth running machine. And the answer is he still has A+++ ball security. I'm sure you all saw the play where they tried the trick play, Leonard Fournette throwing a ball to a 45-year-old quarterback, covered by the other team's best corner on a wet, sloppy field. It didn't go well. At that exact moment in time, Leonard Fournette and Tom Brady were tied with interceptions thrown this year with 1. And then Brady pulled ahead this year. He threw another one later in the game, so now he has thrown 2. But he's still only thrown 2 interceptions all year. That's less than like Joe Flacco. I looked this up now. I don't have it in front of me, but there's a lot of part-time quarterbacks who have thrown more interceptions. Teddy Bridgewater has thrown more interceptions than Tom Brady this year. And there's a lot of quarterbacks who have thrown more interceptions in very limited time. He's still A+ at not giving the ball to the other team, and that goes a long way to helping your team win.
Dak Prescott's one of those. Bailey Zappi just pulling him up now. Mitch Trubisky has
Bailey
a couple.
Zappi, yes.
Taylor Heineke's got 4, and Jameis Winston even has 4, which isn't too surprising. But yeah, a lot of those guys doing really well. Tom Brady is. So hopefully for Bucs fans, they can get things going. To your point, the NFC is pretty much wide open at this point, and they're in control of their division. The Bucs are, and got a week to rest up and get even better. One more kind of coaching, I guess, is a coaching decision, but not really a fourth down decision like we normally do. There's been a lot of chatter, especially in the fantasy community, obviously, about Christian McCaffrey's week 10 usage. So he saw about 2/3 of the snaps, but Elijah Mitchell outcarried him 18-14 in his first game back from injury. The 49ers gave up a second, third, and fourth round pick next year, plus a 2024 fifth rounder for McCaffrey. So for that capital, you don't think they'd want Christian McCaffrey in a timeshare. But we know how Shanahan is. Do you think this was maybe Shanahan just wanting to get Mitchell back into things against a subpar rush defense in the Chargers? Or is it him sticking with his Patriots, like you never know who's going to get the touches approach, and wants to keep both of them healthy, basically, which seems like it might be the most realistic reason?
So a couple days ago, Kyle Shanahan went on the Murph and Mac show on KNBR radio in San Francisco, and they asked him about this very question. Here's this quote, which is it's perfect in its cruelty to fantasy managers. We went into that game saying, in a perfect world, when this game is done, it would be awesome if they, meaning Christian McCaffrey and Eli Mitchell, it would be awesome if they could have even carries. We thought that would be hard because Christian's just going to be in there a little bit more, especially on third down and stuff. I told Anthony Lynn, the running backs coach, that if it ended up that way, close to even, that would be a hell of a job substituting. So yes, his goal, his stated goal in an ideal world, if everything goes according to plan, is that McCaffrey and Mitchell will split carries 50-50 every week. You're welcome.
I'm one of those fantasy managers. I was very frustrated at that. Got to share Christian McCaffrey. But the good thing is for fantasy managers, no, this isn't really a fantasy show, but he did still get 14 carries. We know the 49ers are going to run the ball, so he's probably going to get a good share. And he did have, I think, 5 targets, ended up with 3 or 4 catches. So he was the receiving back as well. I think Mitchell only had 1 target in the game.
He's going to get a lot more passes. So especially if you're in the PPR league, McCaffrey's the better guy, obviously. But I would also like to note that despite making this major investment in a new running back who is both a good runner and receiver, and then splitting time with him with another guy who clearly you think is also a good running back, Kyle Shanahan punted on 4th and 5, 4th and 1, 4th and 4, and then 4th and 5 in LA territory.
Oh man!
And that 4th and 1 kick, by the way, a 13-yard punt.
That's tough to see. I mean, at that point, it's like just put both of them out there. You got to put all 3 of McCaffrey, Mitchell, and Deebo Samuel in the backfield and see what you can make work. That'll really confuse some people. But we'll see. I imagine that'll carry forward. But again, the week before with Jeff Wilson, who they liked, obviously didn't like him enough, they shipped him off to Miami. He only saw like 14% of the snaps, while Christian McCaffrey saw 86, I think it was, in that game that he accounted for 3 touchdowns. So we'll see. Could be one of those things where you never know. But the coach's job is to win games. And if that's what wins the 49ers games, then Shanahan is doing a pretty good job. Has a tougher time going forward than that Chargers team, who you mentioned the offense has really been struggling without Mike Williams. Keenan Allen had a couple other injuries to tight ends. So we'll keep an eye on that. But Shanahan, when he has gotten to a Super Bowl before, is generally known, I think, as a pretty good coach. So we'll still keep an eye on them. People are going to be looking at him a lot, especially in the fantasy community. That takes us now to our last part of the show, where we're going to look forward now instead of looking backwards. Look into the future to our favorite matchups from this week. Vince, start with you as usual. Which is the matchup you are most looking forward to come this weekend, week 11?
So about a minute or 2 ago, I realized I had forgotten to make a pick for this and panicked and jumped over here to the NFL schedule page. And I had mentioned earlier that we talked about Green Bay and how much they want to run the ball, and the only teams that run the ball that often are Chicago and Atlanta. Well, look who's playing this week. Chicago Bears at Atlanta Falcons on a Sunday morning here in Seattle. So I'll go ahead and pick that one. It's 2 teams kind of hanging around the fringes of the NFC playoff picture. Their window's quickly closing. They're running out of time. It's probably a loser out game. Probably a winner out game 2, to be honest, but you never know. Stranger things have happened. And it could be a game where the first team to complete a pass wins. So you never know. But if you're a fan of old school football and options and scrambles and that sort of thing, you're going to see a lot of plays probably with the quarterback and the ball in their hands running downfield. So I will take the Chicago Bears at the Atlanta Falcons in the throwback coaching game of the week.
And there could end up being a lot of points in that one because those defenses are not very good. Chicago is 29th in DVOA. Atlanta is 30th. Both
No,
are not good against the run either. They're 25th and 26th and 29th and 30th against the pass. So it could be a lot of points.
I believe the stat was for the Bears, the first team ever to score 29 points in a row in 3 games in a row and still lose all 3 games. That's the way the Bears season is going. They also, like the Raiders, have a lot of work to do.
Yeah, had more kicking woes. They lost that game Sunday partially on a missed extra point that would have gone to overtime. The game could have been played differently, but yeah, going to be a lot of running there. Mine that I picked is it's a game. It's the Thursday night game, so this might air after the game. But talking about Green Bay and hosting Tennessee on Thursday night, Green Bay's 30th in DVOA against the rush. They allowed 115 to Tony Pollard last week, giving up over 140 per game. Well, who do they have this week? Eric Henry, who I believe his 100-yard rushing game streak was snapped last week. I think I saw was it 5 games, but they've played him before. They slowed him down a little bit, but it's going to be tough because they struggle against the run again this year, and if they can't stop him, it'll be a long night. And then on the other side, just to see if Green Bay can run the ball versus Tennessee and just see if that offense can carry forward that success from Sunday night. Tennessee's the number 1 ranked rush defense in DVOA. They're also 13th against the pass. They've been solid this year. So I want to see if Christian Watson, Allen Lazard had a quiet game. I think a lot of people are overlooking him because of Watson's big game. I want to see if they can carry forward that success from Sunday night. Tennessee also 4th in DVOA against passes to running backs, but they do allow the 7th most yards. So maybe a lot of volume for Aaron Jones. Want to see how they work him into open space and get him some efficient touches against a team that's very good at limiting efficiency on passes to running backs. So going to be a good one. Again, you may be watching this after it's happened, so you'll know the answers to those questions as we sit here wondering about the answers to those questions. So that will do it for this week, the Week 11 Coach Ranking Show. Before we go, like I mentioned at the top of the show, don't forget you can get a free $100 from Underdog Fantasy using promo code OUTSIDERS. They'll match your deposit up to $100 with that promo code OUTSIDERS. Also, don't forget to sign up for FO Plus at footballoutsiders.com/subscribe for NFL betting picks, fantasy advice, premium stats, premium articles. You get an ad-free experience, and above all else, you get access to the data that we have on Monday, a day earlier than everyone else. So you get first access to that data on Monday. And last but certainly not least, don't forget about the Football Outsiders Discord. Join for in-game conversation for every game beginning Thursday night, all day through the day on Sunday and Monday night as well. Thanks for watching. Vince, thanks for joining me as always, and we'll see you not next week. Actually, we will be off next week for Thanksgiving week, and we'll be back the following week.
Sounds good. See you then.